Morning folks, John McNamara, your Wilbur-Ellis Agronomist here at the Plattsmouth location. Wanted to take a minute today, visit with you surrounding some of the fall programs and options for you as you turn the page from this year into 2021. A couple of things of note. We've talked about this before, however, it is worth noting again. We do have a 5% interest APR option for you on all prepay dollars this year. Prepay in place by the end of this year will receive 5% APR interest until that is applied toward the purchase of a product for 2021, as long as those purchases are applied by July of 2021. So that's an option to consider. A couple other things that we have going on for bookings that are done here by the 20th of November, and today being the third election day, you got a few weeks to make up this decision. For all applications, spreading, that type of thing, we're basically knocking $1 off per acre if you get that booked here with us by the 20th of November. So as an example, if we're running a post rig or we have a liquid floater, normally that's a $7.50 per acre charge. I'll knock $1 off that, that's $6.50. Dry fertilizer spreading, just straight spreading, that's another $1 off of the normal $7.50, that goes to $6.50. If we're spreading through VRT or grid sampling, that's $1 more, so that's $8.50 down to $7.50, and grid sampling itself goes from to $7.50 as long as we have those booked acres by the 20th of November. We have obviously migrated more toward the grid sampling and the VRT application here in the past years, which we encourage. It helps you save money. The investment up front is a little bit higher. However, you're saving some of those dollars from a fertility standpoint and putting it on the acres that really need the fertilizer versus other areas of the field that perform and produce very well. And since that's kind of fresh in your mind and we're just generally finishing up harvest, that's something to consider going forth. So let's talk a little bit about fall programs. Many of them, as far as soybean pre-emergent for next year, contain 2,4-D or a 2,4-D / combination with an authority or classic pinnacle or those types of things, which are fine programs to control growing winter annuals right now, but also offer you some residual protection for germination next spring. So we've got a number of programs in place that will help you, and I think it helps buy time. We've talked a lot about controlling weeds when they're the smallest, and now is a really, really good time. They're just emerging, as well as you getting some residual activity on unemerged weeds, another consideration as you go forth in next year's planning. We are always fighting water hemp and Palmer amaranth and mare's tail and those types of things, and trying to get a hold of them prior to their emergence is certainly a wise management practice. So we've spent the past summer talking about the Mynard Plot and some of the ongoing plots that we have down there that are non-genetic. Things such as the corn planting depth study. We also had a corn population study. We had kind of a disease shield progression looking at disease shield genetics offered through DeKalb versus non-disease shield genetics and how that progressed and affected not only standability but also yield this year. We also have a soybean population study. And as always, we have a seed treatment study. So wanted to share some of these results. Much of this is posted on our website or we've sent it out via email, but I wanted to kind of just review that quickly with you as far as some of the results that we found. Realize that these are strip trials. It doesn't have a lot of statistical benefit, actually no statistical benefit. However, it does serve as a reference point when you're considering management styles and changes potentially for the following year. All right, so we'll start out with our corn population trial, and if you remember, we had a fairly wide range of populations down there, up to 36. And we've looked at this work for the past number of years, however, because of the residual question throughout the winter of what population should I try? What population works best? And this is a reference point for you. And also we've looked at the return on your investment. So as an example, Management style is throughout the same. There's no difference in fertility, planting date. All of this is basically managed the same way from an input standpoint. 24,000 down at Mynard, which is actually pretty good, yielded right at 240 bushels. However, when we look at 32,000, it yielded 257. So now we start talking about and thinking about what's my added seed investment? What's my added fertility investment in doing this? And realize that we didn't do that down there. This is just showing you the genetic differences between the populations. In the past 10 years, we found your best return on your investment, you're considering all the fertility and everything that goes into a higher population, not only in seed cost, but fertility and everything else. If you're in that 30 to 32,000 range, with the genetics that are used this day and age, generally serves you the best. So this kind of reaffirms another chapter in the story as far as what we already know. Let's talk about the starter trial. So we had basically 5 gallons of 1034O down there with a starter and a non-starter. Pretty basic, pretty standard as far as starter treatments go. The starter yielded 247.5 and the no starter yielded 248.1. And you're going to say, well, why would I do that? Here's the thing that I will always defend with fertility maintenance, and this is emphasis on maintenance. There's no better way to put trace elements into the soil, trace elements that are non-mobile in soil solution into the soil without incorporating it somehow, and this is a form of incorporation. So things that aren't very soil mobile. Let's use phosphorus as an example. So the application of 1034O would help not only in this year with stock quality and water maintenance within the plant, but also carries on to the rotational crops such as soybeans. So that's a consideration as you go through, is maintaining your fertility level, keeping that baseline fertility out there so that you can take advantage of the weather when it presents itself. And when I go through these yields, don't kid yourself, Plattsmouth didn't miss a rain this year, and it made a big difference even 3 miles north, south, east, or west of here as far as what the yields were. So don't get thinking that we're doing a better job in management than maybe is going on in other areas of the country. This is just a matter of rainfall. So always consider balancing your fertility. Applications of starters is one way to do that. Potassium application is another thing that's a benefit with the starter. It's just a matter of, are you equipped to do that? And that's another added cost of outfitting planters to apply starters. And the other thing that people really dread is dragging a nurse tank around with you in the spring. That may not be very appealing. So it's one of these things that we consider throughout the whole process as far as the benefit versus the expense. So let's talk a little bit about the seedling depth trial. So we use the same hybrid, same population, and aside from the population trials, all the corn down at Mynard was dropped at 32,000. So we had a 4-inch depth. Now realize that this was planted on the 5th of April, and I probably would have seen a lot more difference in yieldability just straight from planting depth if it would have been a little bit cooler this spring. If you remember, we had a pretty early spring, pretty warm, pretty dry. We had the crop planted in record fashion, and so I would have expected the 3 and 4 inch depths to be a little bit more productive if it had been colder, if the soil temperature at planting depth would have been a little bit colder. However, that all being said, 2 inch depth, which we normally expect, is kind of right in there as far as your best yielder at 253.6. The 3 inch depth was 243.3. The 4 inch depth, ironic, and this is again an outlier. So again, this is things that may drive statisticians crazy. 4 inch depth is 252.6. Now we're not encouraging that. I always will tell you that between 2 and 3 inches is probably a pretty good place to be planting or setting your planting depth every year. The earlier, colder soil that you're planting into, deeper soil placement of the seed usually benefits you. So consider that as you go forth if you haven't done so already. Talk a little bit about the soybean population trial. So you've probably seen a number of data points and discussions from academics that encourage you to drop lower populations. This has been going on here for the last 5 years or more. We've done this every year to kind of add a local flavor to it. Same variety in AG 36X6. We dropped it from 100,000 seeds per acre up to 175. Now, my own personal choice and suggestion for you to consider is look at populations at harvest, not so much what you drop, because there's a lot of things that impact from the population from what is dropped and established to what is harvested. Things like soybean cyst nematode, sudden death syndrome, gall midge, which has been the biggest pain here lately as far as maintaining stand. These all impact what your final stands are. So normally we talk about maybe a 3 to 5% loss from what you drop to what you harvest. In this case, this year, it was a little bit more than that. So as an example, from a yield standpoint, 100,000 yielded 64.3, 125,000 yielded 67.7, 150,000 yielded 66.2, and 175,000 yielded 71.3. Now, this is not about higher populations mean better yield. If you remember back into the early 90s when this little thing called no-till really became catchy and everyone was dragging drills around and they were planting with drills at 8 or 9 miles an hour, it wasn't so much the cost per acre, because that was long before Roundup Ready 2 soybeans came along. It was a matter of getting a thicker stand, maintaining and utilizing the maximum amount of ultraviolet light from the sun, using the stand of the soybeans as a weed control measure, and those things are all still in play. The driving of the populations down is more of a cost per acre thing on your seed. So long and the short of it, 150,000 appears to be your best rate of return on your investment in that neighborhood. So if you're dropping 160,000 and you maintain or harvest 145 to 150,000, that's what we found to be most productive as far as your return on your investment. So things to consider as we go forth. So let's talk a little bit about soybean seed treatments. And so for the last 15 years of looking at soybean seed treatment versus the untreated check. And it goes without saying the benefits of what seed treatments give you as far as stand establishment, especially at lower populations. So it kind of goes hand in hand. If you're thinking about lowering your soybean population, I'd certainly encourage you to consider seed treatments if you haven't done so already. Again, warding off other seedling-borne diseases or soil-borne diseases that affect stand establishment. We want to maintain that because we might have to fight off other things like gall midge and soybean cyst nematode as we go through the season. So long and the short of it, we don't have them all out yet. We've got about a dozen soybean trials out, but where we've seen this, the Acceleron custom blend seed treatment has been giving you about a 3.5 bushel advantage, which is about trending as far as what we normally see. Now, the cost per acre, cost per bag is $13 a unit. It's been that way for the last 10 or 15 years since I've been here. Now, you want to consider that on average versus what you could sell the beans for today, and you by far have a return on that investment. So again, things to consider as you go forth this fall. All right, folks, so things that are probably on the tip of your mind right now is, how did my performance in my fields measure up to everybody else's? And I hear a lot of things. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true, doesn't mean it's false. However, I hear lots of performance from low to high. You know, in general here in the Cass County, southeast Nebraska area, we're going to have a wide variation. Again, I mentioned before, primarily based upon rainfall pattern that we had this summer. Most growers that I've visited with have said that the beans were okay, but the corn was really good. And if you think about this, if you remember middle part of August where we had those 5 100-degree days, and we had those 5 100-degree days kind of in a critical standpoint of filling those pods, getting that extra yield, trying to maintain pod credibility at the top of the plant. And we didn't have a lot of rain to work with. So I think where you're going to see these wider variations, or geez, these sky-high yields of 60 plus, maybe 70 plus bushel beans, really occurred where you were graced with a little bit more moisture going into that 5-day hot streak when we were trying to finish these beans out. So that's kind of a generalization that I have heard and seen. Beans were pretty good, average pretty good, corn was phenomenal. So, you know, bear in mind you're going to have variations, you know, really from Louisville to Plattsmouth, from Plattsmouth to Nebraska City. We've seen that. So, you know, if you're coming in and you're saying, well, geez, my beans only made 40, and I'm talking to a guy 5 miles from me and he made 60. Yeah, we've seen that too. So don't feel bad as far as your management style. It was truly a matter of moisture and rainfall this year. Okay, so wanted to visit with you, share a little data. Now, I talk a lot about the grid. I talk about the grid all year long. We're in the process of final assembly of the grid, but I wanted to share with you some yield data of what we've got out so far. So as an example, there are 5 hybrids that have really stood out, and we've talked about them a little bit about this. We've talked about placement with them, and it's kind of coming into fruition from a standpoint of how they're performing. Things like 5982, 6357, 6595, nice dryland hybrid has really performed well this year. 6675 and 7027, they've all kind of done exactly what we thought they would do. Couple of things of note as far as some of the newer hybrids. 6289, brand new, that's done well. There's a nice little hybrid in 6618 that has done well. So when I talk about done well, I'm going to talk about averages. So out of these 18 locations, a lot of this corn is in the high 230 bushel range. We've got yield environments from a high 100s and that 190 bushel average, plot average, to 240, 245 plot average. So that's what generates a lot of this data. So as an example, running average right now within these plots, 5982, just under 240 at 239.7, 18 locations. Things like 6357, 239.8. So basically a twin, one in 109, one in 113, both really good dryland hybrids in that 109, 113 maturity. Don't sell 6088 short. It's still around. We'll still sell it. The things that dog 6088 is primarily its harvest appearance. Yeah, we would suggest you need a fungicide on that to maintain stock quality, but yieldability, if gotten early, does real well. 6080, brand new one, that's right alongside 6088. So those are considerations in that 110-day market. Let's skip up into the 115. So old standards such as 6435, still there. We'll still sell it. However, we have a new one in 6465 that's offering about a 4 bushel advantage right now across those 18 locations over what we find in 6435. 6595 is really dominating in this maturity, primarily again with its dryland adaptability. I would be cautious to say it's drought tolerant. However, it has done real well, even across the river in Iowa where it was a lot drier than it was here. So that's another consideration. Skip up into the high teens as far as the 116 to the 120-day maturity, 6675, 7027, again, all in that high 230 to 240 range. So we don't have a lot of spread between the 109 and the 120-day maturity stuff this year, which is good and bad from a standpoint of separating which one works best for you. I think it's more about your management style, when you want to plant, when you want to harvest, stock integrity, how long it takes you to harvest. Those are the things that go into your decision, maybe including all the yield data, of course, but always encourage you to look at the big picture, not just yield, because if we can't get it into the combine head, it's probably not going to yield real well. So that's what's going on in corn. Wanted to hit a little bit upon where we're at with soybeans, XtendFlex, the recent labeling of the new not the new over-the-top, but a new label for some of the over-the-top products such as Fexaplan and XtendiMax. So the EPA just approved that last week, 5-year label that goes probably beyond that, but for right now it's going to last for the next 5 years, and that deals with any XtendFlex hybrids, varieties that go or planted out there. EPA also in the European Union approved the XtendFlex maturity. So long and the short, you're going to be able to spray over the top with a dicamba, Roundup, and Liberty-based program on XtendFlex soybeans for the 2021 season. We will we'll be taking delivery of some of the XtendFlex beans later this week. So a couple of things to note. Will you be able to still plant and use Roundup Ready 2s, such as 33XOs or 29X9s or 36X6s or 37X8s? The answer to that is a resounding yes. You will also be able to use XtendFlex beans anywhere from a 2.7 up to a 3.9. We will have them. Just to give you a little bit of a snippet of data. Dozen sites, 36XF1s, 36FX1s, and 36XFOs, I should say. 236s, similar to what we find with 36X6. Basically, a choice between a tough soil dryland variety versus one where you got a little bit more fertility and your soil depth to fertility is a little bit better. Deeper soils, bottom soils. FX1 would probably be a little bit better dryland soil. FXO would probably be a better bottom soil, that type of thing. So FX1 is showing its ability to adapt to dry weather this year, coming in at 70.74. 36X6, our long standard in a 3.6, coming in at 72.4. So my approach on all of this is such. This is a new trait platform. It's combined with a new genetic package. I always like to walk before we run with this. Now I realize that you might be committed to the herbicide program. Don't let the herbicide program necessarily sell you on the genetics. You know, is 36FX1 a fit for us in southeast Nebraska? Absolutely. Is 36X6 a fit for Nebraska? Absolutely. So it's a matter of trending into the new genetics. Yes, it's going to pose some challenges when it comes to herbicide application, making sure you've got it cleaned out from the planter standpoint, making sure each field is pure if you do decide to use Liberty-based program. However, just because you bought FX or XtendFlex beans doesn't necessarily mean you have to spray Liberty on them, okay? So just a little bit of snippet of data. We're working on getting that completed. Should have it here in the next week or so. We will post that online and we'll have the copies of it here in the office. Just to reiterate where we're at on programs, the 12% volume and 8% cash discount according to the Bayer programs expires on November 17th. We here at Platinum an 8% cash discount up to January 10th. Gives you time to finish up field work. Maybe you got some bulldozing you want to do, or some anhydrous you want to do, or field work in general you want to do before the weather closes in on us. Maybe you want to visit with your tax preparer and figure out where you're at on taxes, or should I use some of that prepay money this year versus next year? Maybe you want to do a combination of both. The 12% volume and 8% cash, folks, is in play as long as seed purchases are paid in full by January 10th of 2021. So this has been a lot of information, and I kind of stumbled through it in places. However, encourage you to visit with us, call us, give us a chance to earn your business yet again, and we look forward to seeing you here this fall and into the 2021 season.